Using common minerals, I'm able to capture the jitter of the zero-point energy that's a hot talk of many physicists around the world. And I'm able to create cells and structures similar to this one here that actually produce power for long periods of time. As you can see, we're getting a reading here of almost half electron volt from this pile of crystals. And this is steady and has been tested up to a year's time and under stress tests also. So, which made me decide to then, of course, mount the same material in cylinders. And these cylinders here, of course, are various types of cylinders. One being an artillery shell or aluminum cylinders. I could take this one here and do a reading on him. And actually, you cannot see that, but we'll try here. Okay, can I tell what we're getting? About half a volt, about half electron volt. And this guy here. Different cylinders, of course, there are different mixes in there, and I found that that some of the cylinders are not as powerful as this material here, or this very tiny one here. Actually, this has more power than this large artillery shell unit here. And what I want to do, of course, is to demonstrate it in the sense of it making actual power. And that means to turn a small motor. And that can be done. I've accomplished that many times. We're just taking a reading here on the very small one. 1 cubic inch of raw material from the earth. It's still powering for over a year. Basically, I want to use these as replacements for batteries, which I think I can achieve. And to demonstrate even more so, I'm looking for a hot cylinder, which I'll call a hot one. Will maybe be this one, which is a combination of material from this little cylinder back into here. Instead, actually, well, we can take a voltometer reading on him and see if he's up to par. We get 1.635 electron volts, so I think that he's lively enough to power this little motor. And we'll find out. So I'm holding this motor here. I attach a lead to the base. Get him out of the way. Okay, I'm attaching this to the base here. Another lead to the top, and it should spin, which it does. So yeah, basically, this kind of material powering motors. Of course, it's a very small motor at this time, but scaled up in larger amounts of material, can power up to several horsepower if needed. So that basically is sort of the secret to the energy crisis, in my opinion anyhow. It's using ordinary materials, non-toxic, that will interface with zero-point energy in space and time. Now we're taking a reading of one of the most powerful ones, the 1.635 volts, fluctuating a bit, but very steady and strong. And that was the one that powered the little motor. There's quite a host of natural, non-toxic minerals in there that activate. Much similar to the Moray valve of 1927, where Moray used natural minerals and got a lot of power in the range of about 5,000 watts usable power at 110 volts at 400 cycles per second. Long wire antenna. Using basically the same kind of principles. It's sort of a shake and bake recipe. It's extremely simple, ridiculously simple. And I do that. I simply just put it in, heat it up, shake it around, and let it crystallize. And once it's crystallized, then it captures and conforms to the 0-point energy that's around all of us. And actually, I find the most simplest of recipes the most powerful, meaning this little fellow here, where I tried to advance the field strength or the energy, however, failing in a few of these cylinders, which are quite, as one would say, it would only put out millivolts. This one here is another powerhouse unit. Being smaller, actually, they tend to get stronger. Again, it's reading about similar to this pile here. But again, I should take a reading on this because he's quite interesting to a lot of people. Being the smallest of them, that would be approximately a third of a volt. Always steady, always strong. I've used direct shorts on these kind of together for days at a time, and they still keep on pumping out energy. Some explanations, of course, can be found in solid-state physics in the old ham radio magazines when transistors were first coming out, and that will help the viewer to see some of the technology in those days, and for the future can see also the possibilities of what they call a space charge and junction barrier type of technologies and crystals. The interesting aspect of this technology is that these cells, crystalline cells, can be put in series and parallel to add up voltage and also add up amperage. So theoretically, if you had a room or a refrigerator full of them, you could power a lot of different types of appliances. You can have 110 volts if you wish, if you had them all in series, and then parallel for the amps. Well, also they cooperate with one another, going in series and parallel. This makes them quite practical. Plus, they're very cheap to make, and they are basically from just nature's own raw minerals.
I've seen levitation of steel ball bearings, glass, where they will levitate. Unbelievable. I've seen electricity go right into the objects and a million pieces just fly apart.
In fact, using only 75 watts of energy, enough for a small light bulb, Hutchison made a 60-pound cannonball rise off the table. It would also fuse dissimilar materials, heat metal but not burn the wood it sat on, shatter metal as well as change its crystalline structure. This was something to write home about.
Beginning of 1980, experimenting with all the electromagnetics and electrostatic equipments I had at the time, I started to notice some very, very unusual effects, such as a room being filled up very quickly with multicolored lights, steel bars sitting on wood and not causing any fires, metal turning to jelly, things levitating and jumping off to the ceiling, or simply go up, hover, and then fall back down.
Dubbed by some as the poltergeist machine, there is no one machine, just a lot of old Army surplus gear, randomly tuned by John. No one knows how it works. John has apparently figured out the right combination of radio waves and electrical energy to create the effect. If it could be proven, its impact would be huge. You'd have to rewrite most of the science textbooks, especially the part about... An example of this kind of random event happened in 1989 when a visiting Vancouver news crew was setting up at John's lab to film the Hutchison effect. The target area was that yellow crate with the metal objects. But to everyone's shock, a sponge in the back of the room took off into the air and then fell back down. John didn't actually see it and was genuinely surprised.
Like that, it went up and hit the ceiling 1 second, maybe 2 seconds, and then came down.
You can't be kidding.
No.
Well, some time ago I was doing some testing and got into some big trouble after I levitated a toy UFO and some other objects.
Apparently, John's experiments were lifting objects in nearby homes, and the neighbors called the police.
The police came full bore in here with engineers, inspectors. They photographed all the equipments very carefully. It's almost like if you called in a cleaning crew. They didn't touch anything. It's like they made everything look neater for some strange reason.
It seems like someone in the shadows still cares what our hero is up to. Frustrated by authorities and lack of recognition, John has been spending time developing his new project, batteries that last forever, based on the somewhat bizarre zero-point energy theory. Followers of this theory believe that all physical matter floats in a sea of energy, which, if collected and converted into electrical power, could more than meet all the world's demand for energy.
I feel everything has a life force to it, because I tend to visualize that atoms are a whole universe, and when they're combining one atom to make millions, if not trillions of them, you have a piece of metal, perhaps. Every time you run your hand across a piece of metal, you're taking off several million atoms at a time.
To demonstrate how energy is everywhere, John uses rocks from his neighborhood and in 2 hours makes a zero-point battery strong enough to power a pen light.
I make sure it bonds. Almost 1/2 electron volt. This is better than a conventional battery, simply because it never runs down. So with these things, they could last approximately as long as minerals last, up to maybe 1,000 years, unknown.
Realizing his batteries could help solve the world's energy crisis, the Japanese have embraced John and funded him to build his bigger crystal-based models.
I got orders from Japan and sponsorship for me to make more of them. So the money would come through into my bank account, and indeed I made units that are actually in Hiroshima City.
While various zero-point energy devices were funded by the Japanese, so far none have taken off on a mass scale.
John Hutchison is probably the very visual proponent of the whole kind of zero-point energy movement. Zero-point energy devices could revolutionize the planet. If you can build a zero-point energy reactor about the size of your microwave oven, put it in the back of your house somewhere, you run your house. You don't need to, you run all its electricity needs. You don't need to pull anything off the national grid. Well, if you put that into the third world, you're going to revolutionize the third world. That is as much a threat to some people as it is a benefit.
And as far as the Hutchison effect goes, I'm rather disturbed that the U.S. government and aerospace corporations has it. The concerns of it being used for an evil force by the military-industrial complex disturbs me quite a bit. I like to see it used for the helping of nature, because there's so much pollution going on with nature. Mankind tends to want to fight each other all the time with wars, whereas Mother Nature rolls on with great energy and power.
It's absolutely essential for the world and survival of the world that we get off petrochemicals. Failure to do so, it really threatens our national survival.
What I like about John is that he doesn't compromise. He doesn't compromise his appearance. He doesn't compromise his lifestyle. What he does is pretty unconventional. So, you know, good on him. I'm all for that, and I wouldn't want him to change. He's fine just the way he is.
Whether building batteries or levitating objects, John Hutchison is an eccentric enigma. Of course, virtually no mainstream scientists take John or his invention seriously. But then only a little over 100 years ago, people believed it was impossible to send a radio wave across the Atlantic. Now just imagine if this backyard scientist really has discovered a primal force of nature that could transform our world.
I am only taken seriously by the military scientists. The academic scientists really don't know what to make of me. Well, to say a lot of other people too don't know what to make of me. I'm just a different person, and I'm kind of happy with myself. I don't want to try and change myself.